Okay, we're live.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I'll now call the meeting of the City Building Committee to order and welcome everybody to our virtual meeting. Due to the COVID pandemic, physical distancing measures, the City Building Committee is meeting virtually. Members of the committee, executive management, and the city clerk are participating via video conference, and the senior leadership team are not visible but are available to answer any questions in case we have them. Our very first item tonight is a referred item that was referred by council to us. And I will read the motion. And I'm suggesting as well that item 6, which is the report to the committee, be dealt with at the very same time. The motion that was referred to us by council reads as follows: that the following motion be referred to staff in the Development Services Department to review and provide information by way of a memorandum at the next City Building Committee meeting. 1, that due to the potential negative impacts on Lake Simcoe, the City of Barrie requests that the Government of Canada conduct a comprehensive federal environmental impact assessment of the proposed Bradford Bypass and make the results available to the public. Secondly, the City of Barrie requests that the Government of Ontario conduct the 15 studies as outlined as conditions to the class environmental assessment for the Bradford Bypass, in addition to studying the potential impacts on Lake Simcoe and the climate. Thirdly, that in accordance with the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, the City of Barrie requests that the Government of Ontario conduct a comprehensive impact assessment on Lake Simcoe and those vulnerable watersheds and inflows into Lake Simcoe. And fourthly, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, Provincial Minister of Transportation, Provincial Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and all local MPPs and MPs. So can I have a member of the committee put this motion on the floor? All right, thank you, Councillor Kungl. Any comments or questions or discussion? Councillor Kungl and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. I was wondering if just about opening some dialogue about this. So I guess I'll open a general question because we got the staff memo back that we're going to look at the same time, and these 4 motions. And I read through some of the supplementary information. So I know we paused at the last city building meeting to give some time to get that staff memo. So do you want to hold that conversation, or are we able to have an open dialogue, including what we're hearing from staff in that memo at this time too, although it's in a different item on the agenda? Because I'm reading the information back as satisfying or seeming to satisfy some of the questions that we had. I'm also looking at item number 3 in the motion as being a topic specific to requesting a comprehensive impact assessment on Lake Simcoe and those vulnerable watersheds and inflows into Lake Simcoe. That's not really covered off in any of the supplemental information that I covered. And that was a good discussion point with Margaret Profit from the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition. So I was, I guess, wanting to open the floor about dialogue about how we approach this motion and the components of the motion.
Well, we have the motion on the floor, and we have the staff report that sheds some light on it and gives us some thoughts. So I think, you know, we can deal with the motion, and then in light of and take into consideration the comments that staff have made. Anything further, Councillor Kungl, on that?
And so I guess I'll leave it as a comment to say, I find the motion carries, so I'll leave it as is. If there's any amendments being tabled, I think the key one that I'm hoping doesn't get lost along the way, that I'm hoping for some good direction next step on, is item number 3, to make sure that there's some way we can influence that study being conducted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. I just have a question of clarification. When you read the motion, does that first paragraph about referral, like that seems like an endless cycle of referrals. Are we moving that piece as well, or is it just 1 through 4?
It's just 1 through 4. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just going through round and round and round. Yeah. No.
Okay. I'm going to see where the discussion goes, but I'm supportive of items 1 through 4 as I was before for the concerns that have been raised around this highway.
All right. Councilor or Mayor Lehman.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. First of all, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Miller, the federal government announced that they've already made a decision on whether or not they would conduct a federal EA. They said yes to Highway 413 and no to the Bradford Bypass. Is that correct?
Is my understanding, Mayor Lehman?
Yeah. So, I mean, unless we change the motion to ask them to reconsider that, I don't think the motion as written, I mean, I think events have passed us by. And to be frank, you know, I'm not sure I would be supportive of, I'm not going to be supporting paragraph 1 for sure, given the feds have already made a decision on the matter. And I think us coming along afterwards as a neighbor, expressing a position contrary to our neighbor, to all of our neighbors here, to ask the federal government to reopen that decision doesn't make any sense. I'm a little more supportive. I'm certainly more supportive of 3, the paragraph referring to the Lake Simcoe Protection Act and the impact assessment. I think the 15 studies piece, my question around that, which is paragraph 2, the memo from staff just refers to the MTO undertaking an update to all environmental studies following industry best practices and current regulations. Are the 15 studies, it's a question to Ms. Miller, are the 15 studies referred to here additional to what would otherwise be done under a municipal Class EA process? Excuse me.
Ms. Miller?
Through you, Chair Rietma, to Mayor Lehman. Brett Greatrix is on the call, and Brett has been working extensively on this. So I'm going to ask him to give you the details with respect to those environmental studies.
All right, Mr. Greatrix.
There we go. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Lehman. The set of studies is similar to what we would typically do for a large transportation project. With the snowdrift assessment is something that we typically wouldn't get into just for the nature of our roadways being urban and not in more open areas, but they are of similar nature.
All right.
Okay, so if
go ahead.
Partly. The motion refers to the city requesting Ontario conduct the 15 studies as outlined as conditions to the Class EA. So what I'm trying to get a handle on is, with the exception of a snowdrift study, which is sort of a provincial highway requirement and not a municipal road requirement, are the other 14 studies that would normally be associated with a Class EA? That's what I understood your answer to be.
Yeah, this would be typically what we do for a Class EA, correct?
Okay, so I mean, if I'm understanding the motion correctly, Mr. Chair, paragraph 2 is really saying do what you should be doing anyway, and I suppose us asking for that maybe clarifies our interest or accentuates our interest in seeing that done. The third one, as you know, when this item first came up, I'm of the paragraphs of the motion, I think that's the one I'm more supportive of. I think we all obviously have an interest in the impact on Lake Simcoe of any new infrastructure investment. But I you know, and I will move an amendment, but I would like to hear from other members of the committee. I think we should delete paragraph 1 and change paragraph 4, so we're only forwarding our interest to the province. I think the attempt to make this a federal EA, that decision's been made by the federal government, and I'm not sure I would have supported it unless we, you know, I think we we need to be careful here what we ask for. We should fully expect anything we ask for to be something that our neighbors require of us. And, I would say to them, if we proposed a major project and somebody in like Springwater or Oro or Innisfil said, please conduct a comprehensive impact assessment on Lake Simcoe, I would say, I would hope we're doing that already. But if we weren't planning to, I would agree with them. And certainly that all of the studies are done, makes sense to me. I don't think we're asking for anything particularly unreasonable there. My comment, Mr. Chair, would be, I think probably 2 and 3 would be okay by me, and sending that off to the provincial government as comment. But my note of caution here is whenever we, as the city of Barrie, express an interest in something that is well outside our boundaries, we need to have a clear reason for that when it comes to an infrastructure planning project. And I think the clear reason is the impact on Lake Simcoe, so I'm willing to support that. But I think beyond that, it doesn't really make sense to ask the federal government for a Class EA at this point, or a federal EA.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Congo.
Thank you, Chair Rietma, and through you to any member staff, but I'll redirect it to Mayor Lehman. When we talk a bit about, and I'm aligned, and looking at, though, if we are considering amendments, perhaps, so 3 I would like to see absolutely continue. With this, as we talk about kind of being outside our direct geography, I guess, around where the bypass is going, would this be a study that we would best situate as our request, or would it also be something that we're asking other municipalities like Bradford, West Gwillimbury to incorporate if they've got more influence on being able to request the ask because they're more directly associated to the development? So would there be of any benefit or consideration for that request being tied in partnership with asking a partner municipality to support that request going forward? So it might have a better outcome around being included in a request that they're directly facilitating with the provincial government, rather than a standalone, we would like this to be done as City of Barrie.
As in, sorry, Councillor Congo, is your question, should we seek other municipalities' support for this motion?
Well, I was wondering, or is there another ask where we're asking other municipalities that are directly involved with this development to actually include it if they can best facilitate or influence it happening? So is it limited in how we frame it in the motion if it's just the City of Barrie's opinion that we'd like this done? Or can there be a communication or outreach to actually asking those municipalities to make sure it's included in any of that formal package or project with the provincial government on this bypass?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I guess my take on it is this. What Bradford's trying to do here is get traffic congestion out of their downtown, trying to reduce the negative impacts of vehicle emissions in their core area. The Bradford councillor that I spoke to about this, one of the issues they've been looking at, for example, is they would like to move towards pedestrianizing or improving the pedestrian realm in some of their core area, but they see the traffic impacts of the current transportation system as being a problem. I think there are some other reasons related that are probably purely economic development or just convenience related in terms of the widespread support among the South Simcoe municipalities for this. But I think so. But when we start to get into comments on a process, are we more likely to be, if the goal here is to ensure that the province is properly considering the impact on Lake Simcoe, for example, are we going to have more impact if we get other municipalities to support the same kind of motion? Yes, I think we would. I think that's probably true. Yeah.
So I guess, thank you for that. And supplement, Chair Rietma, then I guess I would say I'm not sure how to customize that or if it just falls to our communications, but should this pass, I'd love to see any type of leverage or complementary support we could get that might be deemed appropriate from those municipalities to help us in making sure that there is a robust assessment done on those vulnerable watersheds tied to Lake Simcoe. And if it's more likely to occur, if we've got more support for that, or more invested partners tied to the provincial government on this initiative, then I'm not sure if we would include them in the naming of individuals or in item 4, or if we just would do an outreach following tonight, however this proceeds.
Okay, I suppose we could do it either way. Ms. Cook, I see you turned your camera on.
Thank you, Chair Rima. If there is an interest to get some support from the area municipalities, I would suggest that in paragraph 4, that we add that the correspondence be circulated to the municipalities that abut Lake Simcoe, and then for support. So that could be an amendment to paragraph 4.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right, any more comments or questions, Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Chair Reitma. I'll move that amendment to add that the resolution be circulated to the municipalities in the Lake Simcoe watershed.
Okay. Councillor Congo.
If I may, is there tie into that amendment just for a bit more description, so rather than it be received as a point of information, there's an ask for support? So if there's a continuance of that around to be circulated to member municipalities tied to the Lake Simcoe watershed in requests that they consider echoing that request for the study of Lake Simcoe.
All right. I'll look to Madam Clerk to see whether she can wordsmith that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Aylwin.
Sorry, I have a suggestion that we add that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the municipalities in the Lake Simcoe watershed along with the request for support.
Okay.
For
That's
the resolution.
All right, so we have that amendment on the floor. Any discussion? Questions, comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Thank you. All right, that carries unanimously. All right, so now we're back to the motion as amended, and I think Mayor Lehman also had an amendment. So
yeah, I was just going to move that we delete paragraph 1, Mr. Chair.
All right. Did you also want to?
Oh, sorry. Yes, we should amend paragraph 4 as well to remove the federal ministers and ministries.
Okay. All right. So we have that amendment on the floor. Any discussion on that? Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Chair Reitma. I'm not supportive of this. I realize that the federal government has come out with a decision. They have ordered a federal environmental impact assessment for Highway 413, but they haven't for the Bradford Bypass, which boggles the mind a little bit because the issues with these two highways are actually very similar, both in terms of the impact on significant wetlands and wildlife habitat, but also the potential climate change impacts of building a highway through these natural areas. So I think to be consistent, it would make sense for the federal government to do a federal impact assessment on both projects. So I will be supporting this amendment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Any discussion or questions from members of council? I saw you, Councillor Congo. Go ahead, Councillor Congo.
Thank you, Chair Reitma. So I guess I might be belaboring it a little bit, but then with that respect, I mean, I see the 2 points of view. Is there, you know, from you know, tracking then to council and for broader consideration, is it a statement that we want the government to reconsider? And is that the language to maybe to throw out there? On the other hand, what's the purpose, what's the greater impact? So it sounds like we've also, the government's made a decision. And so I hear the merits of whether or not this would carry, other than being on public record, as a point of view around asking for that reconsideration. So in acknowledging the current state, I mean, I'll support that amendment because I think it is good to identify maybe a position around a statement around a request for reconsideration, though I'm assuming it's quite unlikely. But I think good to facilitate the conversation. So I guess for me, I just want to open back up the door to say, any likelihood, because I'm sure this will open up broader conversation, and I don't want it to just be dismissed because the government's moved in that direction. But is the intention really just to make a statement on public record about how we feel about this?
Okay. Councillor Harris, and then Mayor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. I guess my question is to Mayor Lehman. In your experience, have you ever come across in a situation where if we ask again, that may, nudge them, or will you, or is it in your experience as well, because you have a lot of experience, that they would look at it as a derogatory request? What is I know that's kind of a vague question, but
No, I think
yeah. Okay.
I mean, so here's my take. Sorry, thank you. The federal government's not going to change their mind. If the purpose of passing paragraph 1 is to make a statement that we're opposed to the highway, we should pass a motion that says we're opposed to the highway, not try and sort of get it to the level of government that we think might be more sympathetic to an outcome that we would anticipate based on the position of the government, which is clearly the dialogue that's gone on this issue for the last several months. I guess if I might, the two concerns I would have, Councillor Harris, would be, yes, we're tilting at windmills for sure. And number two, trying to reopen a federal government decision when you're a municipality about 40 kilometers away is I see it as very, very unlikely, and it is definitely provocative with those neighbors that this has been through County Council, York Regional Council, Town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and others. And in their opinion, as the area municipalities, the benefits of the project outweigh the negatives. I think, and I guess I should leave my comment there because that was your question.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the amendments? Councillor Ellen.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. I think it's important for us to consider the fact that greenhouse gas emissions don't respect municipal boundaries, and also water quality impacts in the Lake Simcoe watershed also don't respect municipal boundaries. And the initial environmental assessment that was conducted when I was 4 years old, that they're mostly relying on for this project now, predicted that there would be severe water quality impacts with this project, and that affects the whole watershed. So I think that's something we shouldn't take lightly. And the reality is that we're in a climate emergency right now, and we need to fully consider the climate impacts of a project like this, and that hasn't been considered at all so far. So I don't think it hurts for us to ask that the federal government reconsider their decision. The federal government has said that climate change is a priority for them. Yes, it might be a long shot, but I think for us to be consistent with the science, and also the fact that we've declared a climate emergency, and we want to reduce our emissions to save our civilization from decline, then I think this is a reasonable thing for us to request and put out there in the public. It's a strong statement that we want due process and a full understanding of what a project like this can do in terms of the impact to both Lake Simcoe and the climate.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Rietma. I guess my question is there appetite around the table then to make an amendment that says that we aren't supportive of the bypass without that investigation? That might be a harsher statement, obviously. But again, I'm really interested in hearing what Mayor Lehman or Deputy Mayor Ward also have with their experience with this type of a situation that I've never been in before. So I value that as well.
All right, good question. Mayor Lehman, I saw your hand.
Thank you. So a couple of things. Again, if the purpose of the motion is to oppose a highway because of its climate change impacts, we should do that, not try and sort of suggest it should go through a different process in the theory that there will be some different outcome related to those climate change impacts. I would note there is a requirement to consider the climate change impacts in the Ontario process. There are real concerns around, will that be heeded? That's a battle for when a environmental assessment is complete, if the project goes ahead at that point. But I mean, you can go through because I'm familiar with this process. There is a sort of 6-part requirement to assess the impacts and model them in terms of the project. And I'm, regardless of who does it, I'd be very interested in those impacts, because what we're replacing here is heavy congestion, which typically generates more emissions, with a highway. But then you're creating a highway that increases the amount of traffic over time, which then, probably claws back and increases over time the total emissions. So, that work needs to be done. In my opinion, the provincial government should consider it very, very carefully in their choices, and they're rightly getting a lot of people questioning whether these types of projects should be prioritized. But I think as a neighboring municipality, I think, if you want to oppose a highway because it's a highway and because of the potential climate change impacts, then maybe the time for that comes when the work is done, rather than joining what I see as a fight that's already over on the choice of whether it's a provincial government study that, a consultant hired by the province that assesses the climate change impacts using the Ontario Environmental Assessment Act, or the federal government. And I mean, if I was compelled that somehow that study would be more comprehensive and deemed more complete or something, then that would be one thing. But I think the purpose of this was to get the decision to the federal government, because those opposed to the highway do not trust the provincial government to adequately consider climate change as one of the impacts of the project. And they frankly trust the federal government more to consider that impact. That may be the case, a political case, but the federal government has already said, we're not intervening in this one. The climate change impacts will be studied by Ontario. And, at the time of the outcome of that, those who wish to fight that battle may well want to. I think on the water quality one, I think Councillor Owen is right. I'm compelled by the concerns expressed by the stakeholders in our area who are concerned about that. And notwithstanding, that's going to tick our neighbors off a bit. I don't mind supporting that part of this resolution. But I really do see it as tilting at windmills to try and reverse what's already been decided by the federal government. I just don't think there's any chance of that. And so, and I don't believe it's going to result in it may result in a different decision. And if that's what the goal is, then we should just be opposed to the decision, rather than, sort of suggesting that a piece of provincial infrastructure go through a federal assessment process. So my view is I would ask for your support on amendment for paragraph 1. And if the outcome of the provincial process is one that says there's severe climate change impacts from this type of project, we can express our concern at that time.
Okay, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Just as a clarification, can we read what the amendment is to paragraph 1 one more time?
My amendment was just to delete it.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, we'll keep it simple. All right. Any further discussion or comments on this one? All right, my view on it is that this horse has left the barn, and the federal government has made a decision. To me, the decision makes no sense whatsoever, because if you're going to send Highway 413 to the Federal Environmental Review, why wouldn't you do this one as well? There's no consistency there at all. I think that also, as a city, we would expect no less from our own work. All of our projects are looked at in terms of, what effect they have on the environment and what effect they have on Lake Simcoe. So I'm sort of inclined to not support this amendment, simply because I agree that it may be tilting at windmills, but at the same time, I think it makes a statement that we say, hey, we think that there should be a very consistent and proper study done. I used to work for MTO, and I am always a little concerned about our friends at MTO, whose job it is to build and maintain highways, and then to have them also do the environmental assessment on a new project. It seems to me that a third party really ought to be looking at that situation rather than the proponent themselves. Anyway, enough from me. As there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. Those in favor of the amendment, and just to be clear, the amendment removes item 1 and also removes that the resolution will be forwarded to the federal folks. Those in favor of that amendment? 2. Those opposed? 2. That amendment does not carry. So we're back to the, oh, sorry, Madam Clerk.
The chair is the chair is the tiebreaker for the vote.
That's right. That's why it did not carry.
Okay. just checking, clarifying. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So we are back to the amendment or the motion, the main motion as it stands. Is there any more discussion on this? Oh, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Just a question, again, of clarification. So when the Government of Ontario does their assessments, do we have any kind of a timeline on when and how that gets reported back to us so that we can go further if we need to, where this situation is kind of, like you said, left the barn?
All right. Ms. Miller, is that a question you can answer?
Sorry, Councillor Harris, could you repeat your question for me, please?
Sure, no problem. Through you, Chair Rietma. Just wondering if you have any kind of time frame estimated onto when the provincial report would come back and for the environment.
Sorry, Councillor Harris, we have no idea.
I'd give it a try.
Yeah,
I know that's usually the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
No, we don't, but we are in regular contact and get updates, and we'll let you know as soon as we have any more information.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the correct answer. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Chair. I just went to the Bradford Bypass project webpage, and it does say that they are expecting the EA for the project they're already expecting approval in December 2022. So it seems like they've already made their decision on that one for sure.
What did I tell you? All right. On the motion then, as it is before us, any further discussion? Councillor Congo.
Thank you. I'm really pulling this apart a little bit here, but with respects to known and unknowns around different project phases of this, is there any time frame or reference to time frame we need to put to item 3? So around the actual impact assessment, that be done in advance of, or do we need to tie it to a timeline?
I'm not sure that we do. It seems to me that it's part of the package of the environmental assessment, and it would be part of that whole review. So I think it would come as part of the process.
Okay. Okay, so we don't need to fold it into the other work that they're doing formally, or note that it's not kind of a one-off, but it really needs to be part of that comprehensive.
That would be my
approach.
view. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion? All right. Those in favor? 3. The motion carries. Those opposed? 1. All right. The motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Moving on, we have 3 advisory committee reports that have to be received. So there are 3 of them. First is the report of the Heritage Berry Committee of April 14. Secondly is the report of the Communities in Bloom Committee, April 15. And then the report of the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee dated May the 4th. Can I have a member of the committee put those on the floor for a minute to thank you, Councillor Kungle. Are there any questions, comments on this? All right, those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, that carries. All right, we've got 1 recommendation from Heritage Berry, and the recommendation has to do with 70 and 72 Dunlop Street, sign installation. And the motion is that consent be granted in accordance with section 33 and 34 of the Ontario Heritage Act for the proposed alteration to a building designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, being 70 and 80 Dunlop Street East, for the purpose of installing a sign described as having a black background with white lettering, being larger in size and backlit, at the Heritage Berry Committee meeting dated April 14th, 2021. Any comments or questions on that motion? Oh, can I have somebody put it on the floor first, please? Thank you, Councillor Cohn. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Opposed of any? Thank you, that carries. Then we have a recommendation from the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee of May the 4th. The first recommendation, excuse me, is an amendment to their terms of reference, that in light of Eric Jacoby Hawkins being appointed by Living Green to be their representative on the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, that the citizen appointment be deemed vacant. Can I have somebody put it on the floor for me, please? Thank you, Councillor Kungle. All right, Councillor Kungle.
I'd like to table an amendment to that recommendation, please.
All right.
We're just gonna create it to be a little bit less specific. So I'm going to replace the motion as tabled with the following: that the composition of the Active Transportation Sustainability be increased by 1 to add a representative of Living Green. And I can speak to that if need be.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Kungle.
Thank you. So I think that best reflects the dialogue at the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee without making assumptions about who Living Green as an agency will formally identify as their representative, and that it doesn't make any assumptions about any further change to composition. So we are actually not reducing or absorbing a citizenship current compensation or replacing it. We're actually adding 1 net new position to increase the overall number of members, and that 1 will be formally designated for Living Green.
Okay, any further discussion? I saw the flurry of emails this afternoon. All right, those in favor of the amended motion? Thank you, that carries. And the motion as amended now. Those in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation from ATS has to do with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that motion says that staff in the operations department investigate the feasibility of creating a plan to phase out gas-powered maintenance equipment through strategies included but not limited to procurement processes, park designs, park naturalization, in order to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions and noise pollution, and report back to Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. Can I have a member of the committee put that on the floor, please? Thank you, Councillor Elwin. Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. I also have an amendment that was actually suggested by yourself. So I'll be moving that amendment to add a second paragraph that staff in Access Barrie investigate the development of a program to incentivize citizens to purchase electric lawn and gardening equipment in order to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions and to reduce noise pollution, and report back to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee.
All right, thank you. On the amendment, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, through you, Chair Rietma. I totally support this. I think it's great that we're really addressing the noise pollution aspect of this as well. I think it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of the other pollution, and it's significant. I mention it all the time because I battle with sound sensitivities because of my PTSD, and I wear earplugs literally when I'm outside on a regular basis. If somebody's mowing their lawn and you think that would be nothing, with people that are also like on the autism spectrum, etc., that have those sensitivities can really impact their day. So that's just my highlighted point of why I love this, and I support that amendment and the motion.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is whether we can get Councillor Morales as excited about electric lawn equipment as he is about other electric vehicles, because we will have another champion on council. That aside, no, I will speak in favor of it too. I do in favor of the amendment, and maybe I'll save my comments on the main motion for then.
All right, fine. Councillor Congo.
Well, I was going to echo that. And so I'll send out an invitation for Councillor Morales to use my electric lawnmower to mow my lawn next time and see if I can get him to become an adopter. But in general, great to see this inclusion from a resident engagement incentivization. That was a good part of the conversation, Active Transportation. Keen to see what staff come back with, and if even some residents opt in and start converting. And whether or not it's something we can help out with in different ways. But I guess my main comment would have been main motion, and so I can hold to that too. Sure.
All right. Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to Councillor Morales buying a electric Mustang. Any further discussion on the amendment? I do have to confess that I was kind of encouraging Councillor Elwin to put this amendment forward. I have an electric battery powered lawnmower. I've had it for 10 years. And you know what? People actually stop me when I'm cutting my grass, and they say, boy, that's a really quiet one. It's really great. And you know, it's 10 years old, it works fine. And the interesting thing is that I don't have to worry about gas or oil or tune-ups or anything. I just put the battery in it and away it goes. And my neighbor looked across the fence and said, gee, that's a nice little lawnmower. Can I borrow that? And you know what? He went out and bought one too. And I think that, you know, I don't know how we do it, but if we can encourage people in the city to think seriously about buying a battery powered lawnmower, I think we'd all be better off. Anyway, on the amendment, any further discussion? All right, those in favor? Thank you, that carries unanimously. And on the motion, then the main motion as amended, Mayor Lehman.
So, you know, I think we need to lead by example, and I'm constantly amazed actually at how on a you know, per use basis, lawn equipment, gas powered lawn equipment is actually a surprisingly bad emitter. Overall, in the mix of emissions, it may be modest, but they are among the worst offenders in terms of carbon emissions. I guess, though, the question has to be asked, was there any discussion at the committee around with staff around doing this, the cost of doing it, is it going to save us money down the line? Is it not? I mean, only because we should always have a full understanding of the impacts on the organization whenever we provide direction like this. I am very supportive of the idea. I just want to understand the impact. So I'll ask, I guess, that of the member of the committee, and then maybe I could ask it of staff if they have any additional color. I guess Councillor Owen.
Well, I did see Councillor Kungal indicating to speak, and she's on the committee too, so I'd be happy to pass it off. Oh, you're gonna
She's passing
it
it
over
to you,
here.
so.
Got it. Okay. So yes, there was a discussion around this. It is sort of a practice already that as equipment is breaking down, they're trying not to replace with gas-powered equipment. But our discussion was around how can we maybe accelerate that, and that's where the request for an investigation into the feasibility of it came in, because they needed to do a bit of work to see the cost-benefit analysis. And that's also why we included park design and park naturalization, because that might be a key part of the strategy, is how can we naturalize more areas of parks so that we don't have to mow them in the first place.
Okay, thanks for that. And maybe if I could, Mr. Chair, just ask of staff. So this is a practice already, expediting it. I mean, is there a hot take on whether or not this is something that, is difficult operational? I mean, the costs are in the same ballpark as I understand it generally, but there is some equipment I suspect that might not be possible to, there may not be battery operated versions that are usable. Is this something we've been looking at yet?
Ms. Miller?
Through you, Chair Rietma, to Mayor Lehman. Some of this is actually going to be presented to you in June as part of the alternative fuel study. The mowers are included in that study, and as Councillor Aylwin has already indicated, it is a parks operations practice to try and purchase replacement tools and equipment that is more friendly to our climate action agenda. But certainly the mowers will be addressed in the alternative fuel study in June.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I'm supportive of the motion as amended. Again, people don't realize that we have 700, I believe, vehicles in the fleet in the city of Barrie, and a surprising number of those are things like rider mowers and equipment that we use in the Parks Department. So I will support this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Through you, Chair Rietma, I also support this. And again, I'll highlight the maybe odd thing in here is the naturalization component of it. I think it makes sense. I think the culture's changing. We want our bees, we want our everything to kind of. I'm loving actually seeing a lot of dandelions out on people's lawns, and they're just so if. Let's just not mow it even. Hey, I'm not going to go that far. I definitely remember how particular my dad was about his lawn. So, but over time, I think, as we maybe slowly naturalize different parks, you just become accustomed to seeing that that's what it is. And the benefit is just ripple effects. So I love this. So thanks.
Thank you. Any more comments, discussion? Councillor Conal.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. And I guess I want to quickly say, for anyone that is interested in this topic, it was a really great dialogue at the last Active Transportation Sustainability Committee meeting. And I would encourage any member of the public watching to tap into that on the recording on the YouTube. But in particular, I wanted to note my compliments to staff. So Kevin Rankin and Kevin Bradley that are a part of those committee discussions actually bring a lot of insight and education about what the city has been proactively doing, and some things that I don't know if we appreciate citywide, like how progressive they are in some of these areas. So I did want to compliment staff on that. It was really great to hear that this was already part of their practice, knowing that we've got that asset management plan too. And on your point, Councillor Harris, about naturalization, I'm not sure where that fits in and whether or not this is a point in time if staff can comment on it or where it best fits. But I know in several forums, we keep coming back to, are there areas also we could just leave as naturalized space in our parks and green spaces? Balancing, the trails that we want to have access to and ticks and safety during the season, but also wanting to see those areas maintained. But sometimes we're going through our neighborhoods and there's a perception of, an area that might be close to a stormwater retention pond, or an area that's not a formal park that is being maintained and serviced. And so there are some questions there, and I'm not sure if that's coming back as part of a proposal also around where are we just reducing over servicing areas, if I can use that gently in reference to over servicing, but where we can more proactively promote areas to be left as naturalized spaces and reduce some of our maintenance. Because I think the other comment there too, around the question of what was the degree of dialogue, was that balancing part that I'm assuming we'll see back in the report, which is, what type of equipment balances out kind of that decision-making framework of how long does it take and the amount of service, both in staff, but also in time on task, that some equipment just lends itself to doing more efficiently. And so what's that cost benefit approach to how we use certain equipment for certain tasks? And on that too, I think the most targeted point of that discussion as well was not just the noise, but also the blowers on our waterfront. And so it's also the inhalation of different bacteria and particles. And so how do we look at public safety and air quality in some of those situations too? So great to see staff moving in this direction.
Good discussion. All right, any further comments, questions? Seeing none, those in favor of the motion as printed. Thank you. Any opposed? None. That carries. All right, we have a third recommendation from ATS, and that one says that staff in Access Barrie be directed to create a communication campaign to promote Bike Month from May 31st to June 30th, 2021 in the city of Barrie through the city's communication channels and social media. Excuse me, can I have someone put that on the, thank you, Councillor Allen. Any questions, comments, discussion on this one? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. Just very, very briefly, I realize this motion is actually directing staff to go ahead and do it and not really reporting on the costs and feasibility of doing it. So we realize that, they're going to have to try to make it work under existing budgets. So, and we know it's last minute. So we really want to thank Access Barrie for doing this. Whatever they can make happen to promote cycling in the city is very much appreciated. And the weather's getting nice this weekend, so I hope we all can get out on our bikes.
Hooray. All right. Any further discussion? Councillor Cohn.
Just maybe another point in case it helps staff around the intention to, and correct me, Councillor Elman, if I'm wrong, but we didn't also want it to be necessarily just limited to May 31st to June 30th, but like that could be a launching off, right? So there's some good pieces there that we can continue to capitalize on. So hopefully whatever staff sees as possible to start within Bike Month, we can continue. And if there's some open data that we could leverage through mapping that might already exist around where are our bike racks downtown, where are our bike repair stations? We've got one by City Hall. So if there's any points of information that are just there that might be easy to pick up and put on that newly refreshed active transportation website the committee's worked on, then maybe that can be a point we can just start helping people to push to assets already on our website that have been refreshed as well.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, the motion as printed, those in favor? Any opposed? None. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our agenda. So thank you, and City Building Committee is adjourned. I guess we'll see you very shortly for Planning Committee.
Ryan, is it a different link or are we on the same link for Planning Committee?
It's a different link, so we had a different stream.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to drop off and jump on.
Yep.
Okay, see you all in a few minutes.
All right, see you in 5 minutes.